What's going on, everyone? So it is being rumored that Gale Weathers is down to return for the upcoming Scream 7. That she basically had a fan encounter and said, like, hey, yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to hopefully coming back, whatnot. Now, there is no confirmation that she's returned, right? Scream 6, she was like the first one signed on. So we'll see. I would imagine she would because she has been so for and about like, hey, let's do this. I mean, she was one of the first to sign on for Scream 5. She was, if I'm not mistaken, the first to sign on for Scream 6. I'd imagine once they kind of get all this worked out and everything kind of, okay, well, now let's start the hiring process for actors and actresses. I think that's when you'll probably get an announcement of Courtney Cox returning as Gale Weathers. Nev Campbell's back on board. They have a relationship. You got to imagine that Gale will be part of this upcoming film. My big thing, though, is I'm all for her coming back, right? I wasn't a fan of how they utilized her in Scream 6. I thought they did a solid job in Scream 5. It was a lot more sort of Gale and Dewey centric, where Scream 6, obviously there was no Sydney, but Gale, I mean, if we're being honest, did Gale even need to be in that movie? Like, what did Gale do that was so crucial to the overall story and plot? I mean, look, I'm not going to complain about having Gale Weathers in a Scream movie. That was fine. But to me, it's like, could you utilize her better? Could you do something with her character, please? Right? Like, I mean, the big thing was her finding the shrine room. And Dermot Mulroney's character, Detective Bailey, he says in the movie that he was planning on revealing it to everybody and say that he found and stumbled across it, right? So even the big thing that Gale did, they basically took away by saying that Bailey was going to do it anyway. And so, yeah, like the attack scene was cool. I did enjoy that, her doing the handing up and, and Star 69 back, calling back and all that stuff. Like, there was a lot that was fun from her that, she had a couple moments. She had a handful of scenes that were like, okay, that was cool. But she didn't serve a purpose to the overall plot and the overall story. And Scream 7 is supposed to be kind of like a two-parter almost. Like, it's supposed to be kind of half focused on Sydney, half focused on the new characters, which is fine, right? You want to build a new group that hopefully is attractive and makes sense to an audience. So that way maybe you can continue to do these films. Do a 7 or an 8, 9, and 10, right? And kind of have these characters that hopefully there is some relatability, some connectability. Hopefully it's not like Scream 5 where like everybody wasn't, or not everybody, but a large majority of people were kind of like, Sam is not it as a lead. Now, people came around to that in Scream 6 because they did a better job kind of portraying her character, which again goes into writing. So hopefully they can actually write a proper story with proper characters and really build those. But also with Sydney, you got a lot of X's and O's that you need to kind of cross off and tell a convincing story with her as well. But my thing is like, okay, if you're going to have Sydney be a main focus and you're going to have the new group of characters be a main focus, what are you going to do with Gale if she returns? Because look, at this point, Gale's been in more movies now than Sydney, right? Courtney Cox has been, she's the only character that's been in every single film. So she is also as much of a final girl as Sydney. I know that Scream is kind of the house that Sydney built, but let's not pretend like Gale isn't like beloved by all, right? Like, she's an incredible character. I have said numerous times, and I still stand by this 100%. Gale has had the best story arc out of all of the characters, even better than Sydney. I mean, her progression from Scream 1 all the way to Scream 5, because again, they didn't really expand on her character in Scream 6, but just look at her character growth and her character development in each film. I mean, she's had just quite the story arc from just this cutthroat, to becoming a stay-at-home mom and a wife, or not stay-at-home mom, but a stay-at-home wife, and just her going from this just kind of monster that you don't know if you should be rooting for or rooting for her to be taken out by Ghostface to somebody that you're like, no, like she can't die. And so I just, my concern is that she's in the film with no real course. Like, there's no real reason outside of like, here's Gale Weathers to be in this film. Like, I hope that there is some impact. And I'm not saying she has to be in every scene and every moment and, you gotta have, no, but like Scream 5, they did a good job of, she was part of the plot, right? I mean, unfortunately, a huge part of that was Dewey dying, right? Which I know a lot of people still aren't happy about. I didn't mind it. I understood, right? You're trying to raise the stakes here a little bit, trying to break some new ground, kind of kick the door open. Fine. So, but you saw Gale. Gale was established basically from the jump. And you saw her really be able to carry over. And one of the things that I talked about with Sydney in Scream 5 was a lot of my same issues with Gale in Scream 6. Right? Sydney was in the film just to be in the film. Right? What did she do to drive the plot? The tracking, planting the tracking device, she says, "Oh, I learned this from Gale Weathers." Just like Dermot Mulroney's character, Bailey, or Detective Bailey, tells Sam that, and basically takes away from what Gale did, like the main thing that Gale did. Sydney says the main thing that she did that took away from Gale. Like, the only thing that was like, oh, that was awesome, and is a Sydney thing that probably only Sydney would do, is like shooting through the doors and stuff like that, right? Like that kind of thing. And the I'm bored. Like, there were cool moments, just like there were cool moments of Gale. But again, what did Sydney do in Scream 5 that drove the plot? We didn't even get to see a reaction of Sydney to Dewey's death. Like, there was just so many things that I feel that they really missed on with Scream 5 and Sydney as a character. And I feel like they did the same thing with Gale in Scream 6. And I don't know if it's just the writers just, like, they can only focus on so many characters at once, or they have to kind of push somebody out, and it's just, again, I'm not super sold on the writing, period, right? I mean, Scream 5 and 6 has been primarily Scream 96 and 2. Yeah, it's had some differences, but a lot of it is just kind of rehashed material. So I'd like to see them tell a fresh story and do something new, to where it's like, okay, you can involve both Gale and Sydney. It doesn't have to necessarily be one or the other. Right? Where it's like, okay, we're driving Gale more, but now we're like Scream 1 through 3 and especially Scream 4, right? Like, let's just call it the first 4, right? Did a really good job of balancing, and that's what I'm hopeful for with Kevin Williamson, that he'll be able to balance Gale and Sydney better. But like, you look at all the other films, and they did a great job of Gale and Sydney balancing. You had almost these two stories going on simultaneously, but you still had other characters involved, and they still had their stories being told. I mean, look at like 96. You had the main friend group, you had Sydney's story, and you had Gale's story, all kind of intertwined, and it hit beautifully, and they were able to structure it beautifully. And I mean, even Scream 2, you think like, Gale's story and her trying to solve and crack everything. I mean, in Scream 2 specifically was more Gale and Dewey, but they did a great job of building some of these kids. Now, you could argue, well, they kind of threw Mickey to the wayside, right? But I think that was more just planned to have it be kind of a surprise, where Mickey kind of just falls to the wayside. And it was like, that was the big surprise reveal at the end, right? Because I love Mickey as a character, but, anyway, before I go on a different type of rant here, my point is that, like, I want to see them have these two in the film and do it effectively, right? Like, let's get some real storytelling with these two. Let's adapt and evolve these two in a way in which we continue to drive whatever the story and plot is for this upcoming Scream. I don't want to see them just kind of, this is a big, great, uplifting Sydney film, but Gale is basically relegated to a glorified cameo. Right? Like, I would rather this be, if you're going to do this film and make it a Sydney-centric film, I'd almost rather you just make this entire film about Sydney and Gale. Right? Like, yeah, you could have other characters and whatnot, but have those other characters fall to the wayside. And you might be thinking, like, well, Fate, like, if that happens, then how are they supposed to develop new characters for the new thing? This is probably going to be the end of an era anyway. This film is very, and look, there are rumors, again, rumors, take it with a grain of salt, but there are rumors still circulating that if this is successful, they might actually continue to make films with Sydney. So, to me, if that's really kind of your vision, like, okay, if we could squeeze out another 2 or 3 films with Sidney Prescott and Nev Campbell, then great, let's do it. Then make it centered and focused on Gale and Sydney. Build them, continue their arc, continue their story. I mean, obviously, I want you to develop other characters, but, I'd rather you just kind of make the film orbit around these two, and then that can bleed into an 8, 9, 10, however many you want to go, and then when you're ready to move off of Sydney, you could start with a whole new cast. Like, you could start with a whole new thing, or, have that one other character, right? So that way you're really only developing heavily like 3 characters, Gale, Sydney, and then have that one female male or a female and a male, whatever you want to do, that you go, okay, this is the character, or these 2 are the characters that we're going to carry over into other installments, like that we want to build this franchise on. Okay, well then you can have the passing of the torch of those characters. But to me, it's just like, get back to simplicity. Get back to telling the story of the characters that matter the most, right? Like, if you're going to have Gale and some of these other characters be glorified, just role, background characters, like, I'm not really a fan of that. I'd rather you just not have them in the movie at all, right? Like, the beauty of Gale is you don't need an explanation. You know why she's there. You don't need to have some convoluted, crazy, like, explanation for why she showed up. Like, it's pretty straightforward, right? So it's like, there you go. So you don't have to take time to develop things that don't need development. So build her character arc. Tell the story of Gale Weathers within the Scream story. Otherwise, just leave her out of it. Have her just staying in New York. She's recovering from her injuries of Scream 6. Like, sorry, Sid, I'd help you, but I literally can't walk. I can't get out of bed. Right? Cool, perfect. There you go. You have an easy out and explanation and not have her in this film. Right? You don't even need to have her relay that. You could have Sydney in a scene just be like, yeah, I try to get a hold of Gale, but she's still not doing good. Or just kind of in passing, like, Gale's still struggling. Like, yeah, boom, there you go. Now you know why Gale's not there to help Sid. Perfect. I'd rather you do that than try to than to just force her into this film and have her just be a background character. I don't need that. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? Do you agree with my points? Do you disagree with my points? Do you think, like, you got to have Gale in the film regardless? I mean, you could make the argument just for, like, to keep the momentum going of her being in every Scream film, right? But I want her to serve a purpose, right? If you can't find the purpose for her, then fine. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, then just move on. Go a different direction. But those are my thoughts. Again, love to hear yours down in the comments. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. Helps me to enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel. What are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.